The After 8 debate on SAFM.
Good morning, it's 6 minutes past 8, and again it is that time at SAFM here where we seek to get South Africans to talk with one another, not against, behind, past or at each other, because we believe that a community that is informed is best placed to broker their own democracy. Of course, recently we've had, and I'm sure you've seen the gallant efforts of the peace talks between Palestinians and the Israeli leadership to try and bring peace in that land that is loved by so many people. Somebody said it is a holy land, and others said it's the land full of holes. Nevertheless, to strive for peace is something that is demanded by Jehovah, by Yahweh, by God, by all peace-loving people, even by the Prophet Muhammad. To pursue peace is a noble thing indeed. However, the University of Johannesburg Senate voted last week to discontinue its link with Israel's Ben-Gurion University unless certain conditions are met. At issue, the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories, which has had a disastrous effect on access to education for Palestinians. UJ says while Palestinians are not able to access universities and schools, Israeli universities produce the research, technology, arguments, and leaders for maintaining the occupation. The university said in a statement that the Memorandum of Understanding governing the relationship between the two institutions be amended to include Palestinian universities chosen with the direct involvement of the University of Johannesburg. The petition, as you will remember and you will recall, we will be informed this morning, was signed by quite a number of luminaries, including Archbishop Desmond Tutu, to say a few. And to help us deal with this matter, as we ask this morning, should universities be willing to speak out for justice even if they can lose funding or face possible closure? To help us deal with this matter, we are joined here in the studio by Brenda, who is the Executive Director of South Africa Association of Ben-Gurion University. Welcome to you, Brenda, to the studio here.
Thank you very much, Caesar. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And of course, we've got Professor Farid Esack, who is the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Johannesburg, also here with us in the studio. Good morning.
Good morning. Great to be here.
Well, as you've heard me before, it is always good for people to talk with one another. And by the time you stop talking, it's a possibility of conflict. Now, you are actually saying, let's stop talking. Let's cut the relationships. In what way would that actually be helpful?
Well, on the surface, cutting the relationship may at a very simplistic level seem to be about the cutting off conversation. On the contrary, it has nothing to do with cutting the conversation. When one escalates one's struggle for justice, you're merely saying that the kind of conversation that we're having at the moment that assumes relationship of insubordination, relationships of power and powerlessness, that you want an end to that kind of conversation. When you see that conversation is used to maintain an abusive relationship, then you say, wait, what is this? What is the value of conversation between these two utterly unequal forces? What is the value of me continuing to talk to you when you're really throttling me at my neck?
Okay, you're talking about abusive. Could you spell that out a little bit for us? What is abusive about what Ben-Gurion is doing and what you guys, gentlemen from UJ, are doing with Ben-Gurion?
Well, Ben-Gurion University, like all the other official Israeli universities, if I say like all the other official Israeli universities, why single out Ben-Gurion then? The University of Johannesburg has a relationship with Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion is directly complicit in supporting the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. Ben-Gurion University supports discrimination against Palestinian students in order to provide this support. It seeks to suppress academic freedom, speech of the faculty of students who oppose the sanctions and the policies of the Israeli state. Ben-Gurion University does not only go along with the legal obligations to support the Israeli state and the Israeli army, but goes much more in competing for the affection of the army and military contracts with the army.
Well, those are strong words. Brenda, you are obviously related to the South African Association of Ben-Gurion University. First of all, could you tell us what your association does and then how does it respond to the issues that has been raised by Professor?
Yes, thank you very much, Caesar, for having us. We welcome the opportunity to have a balanced debate. albeit that we need to correct some facts and separate fact from fiction. The South African Associates of Ben-Gurion University is a representative body of the university in South Africa. Our responsibility is to explore opportunities where the university can share its academic expertise. It is recognized in the world as being one of the leading practitioners, if you like, in many areas, most particularly in the area of arid zone research, water purification, and there are very many ways in which that expertise can be applied for the benefit of South Africans, as it has been applied for the benefit of
Do you
of
recruit students
Africa.
for Ben-Gurion in South
No,
Africa?
we're not a recruiting. Obviously, if students are interested in attending Ben-Gurion University, I mean, Ben-Gurion today celebrates the biggest intake of medical students who have just taken the Hippocratic Oath, in the global medicine class ever, which includes students from all over the world.
Now, what do you have to say with the specific charges that are being leveled against Ben-Gurion in terms of complicity in discrimination and going out of their way to actually get military support and this sort of thing?
Can I just say, with all due respect to Farid, the reality is that let's just separate fact from fiction. I think if there's one thing we understand about the Middle East and about the Middle East peace talks and the Middle East conflict, is that too much of the time we focus our energies on propaganda and not enough energy on peace. And I would quite like to direct this discussion around, if I may, to looking at the practical facts. Firstly, I think it's quite ludicrous given the track record, and it's quite surprising because Farid has been involved in the research around whether or not UJ should continue its relationship with UJ, which Professor Abebe has assured us has been extensive. And in fact, if any research had been done, any attempt at establishing the truth had been done, he would have been familiar with the case of Professor Neve Gordon, who heads our humanities department at BGU, who himself has called for a boycott of certain Israeli institutions, and he has not faced any censure or sanction from BGU or the Israeli state, and in fact was made head of department. There is a very, very vibrant and very, very robust democracy and there's certain, I don't want to monopolize this conversation, but there some serious allegations have been made, they must be addressed. Ben-Gurion does not, and is no way complicit with promoting the oppression of the Palestinians. And, we can either treat the Palestinians with respect and treat them as a people striving for equality, or we can treat them in a patronizing way as eternal victims. The Palestinians that I work with would prefer to be seen as human beings with equal dignity. And this notion that they have no power over their own future negates the very noble efforts that they're putting in and the very courageous efforts they're putting in. Israeli students are by law required to complete military service. Were BGU or any other university to deprive an Israeli soldier of an education, it's in fact a deprivation of their human rights. So we cannot call for human rights on the one hand for one class of person and then deny the human rights of another to an education by saying that's complicit. I mean, MIT does research for the American government. Does that mean that every faculty member of MIT supports the occupation of Afghanistan? Britain has been involved in one of the most vicious, bloodiest campaigns in Afghanistan. Okay. Should we boycott British universities?
Okay, I think that's fair enough, and I think I'd like you to keep reminding me of that question, if you will. But Professor, there is this charge that you are actually a victim of propaganda. What is the base of what you say?
I have been to Israel and Palestine about 10 times. I think it is very, very condescending to speak about academics, and there are 250 of our country's senior-most academics who have signed this petition calling for the University of Johannesburg to disconnect from Ben-Gurion. It's very, very patronizing, a bit insulting to say that all of us are the victims of propaganda. At the one level, yes, it is true that all Israelis have to be conscripted into the army. It's also true that there are many young, courageous people who refuse to be conscripted. Once that happens, though, that's the law. once that happened, Ben-Gurion does two things. Ben-Gurion gives additional support, additional bursary support, way beyond what is required by the government. Ben-Gurion goes out of its way to attract other parts of the military and the Air Force establishments to engage in research with. And so it's not simply a question of Ben-Gurion is required by government to do this. Ben-Gurion goes way beyond the call of duty, and by this we say is complicit in the oppression of the Palestinians.
I want to ask you, Brenda, just to say, what is your association's response to these academics in South Africa? Have you engaged with them? And I'm going to ask you the same question, by the way. If you have engaged Ben-Gurion directly, or has it been just through emails? Have you engaged with them? Have you found out, for instance, for a Bishop Desmond Tutu, who says that they stand with the UJ on this one?
We have not engaged with these academics, all of them, because their protest was registered via petition, which was so mendacious, fallacious, and quite ridiculous that if we talk about patronising. Well, I mean, let's look at some of the comments that were made. I mean, and again, we come back to this idea that Ben-Gurion is complicit in the oppression. It's absolute nonsense. The fact is that Ben-Gurion provides academic opportunities to any Israeli citizen who wants them. The fact is that a sovereign state has a right to a defense force. The fact is that given Israel's hostile neighbors and its military preoccupation, unfortunately, with having to defend its very right to exist, which, let's face it, some of the motivation for this academic boycott has got nothing to do with human rights and everything to do with delegitimizing the state. Israel is the vessel through which the entire human rights agenda is now placed. It's a very convenient way. And, I'm afraid, Prof, that petition was not signed by 250 senior academics. That petition was signed by 250 academics, some of them whose seniority would be well in dispute, and some of them who are using, very conveniently, the Israeli-Palestine issue as a trajectory for their own political notoriety, because we know that that's a fast track to so-called intellectual credibility.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's just a form of intellectual fascism.
All right. The time is 18 minutes past 8 now. If you'd like to join and you want to ask a question either of Professor or either of Brenda, please call in at 0891104208 or SMS 34701. We are talking about the children of Abraham and the struggle that's going on there, and the position that has been taken by the University of UJ in terms of saying, well, look, we need to cut ties. Could you perhaps, Professor, tell us what are the conditions that you've put to the... I know you wanted to respond to the issue of being fallacious, but what are the conditions that you've actually said? If these conditions are not met, we will do the final cut.
The University of Johannesburg has basically set two conditions. The one is a willingness of the Palestinian universities to buy into this. If the Palestinian universities say that they're not prepared to buy into this agreement with Ben-Gurion, then UJ is going to say, we're sorry, we don't want to have only one partner in that region, particularly not the University of Ben-Gurion. The second condition that the University of Johannesburg has set is that Ben-Gurion University must prove that the charges leveled against it for complicity in the military, supporting the military and the occupation, that those charges must be disproved.
Okay, we'll come back to you. We need to take some callers now at this stage. Rolene in Johannesburg. Good morning, Rolene.
Good morning. I'd just like to make two very quick comments. The first is that it's very easy to call for boycott, and as Brenda just recently mentioned, these kind of calls are an assault on Israel's legitimacy as a sovereign state. But how do these kind of boycotts affect us as average South Africans? And we know that water is a scarce resource both in Israel and South Africa, and people in rural areas are the ones that are going to lose out on clean water, on pure water, and a university like the University of Ben-Gurion can give us much-needed technology to help us and to help average South African citizens, then surely we would be cutting our noses off to spite our faces if we boycott.
Okay. Thank you.
The other issue I'd like to make
very quickly, Rolene, yes,
is that boycotts are counterproductive to peace talks, because this is where the true emphasis on peace, the true path to peace happens, and it is at a grassroots level between academic institutions and between ordinary Palestinians and Israelis.
Okay, thank you very much, Rolene. By the way, I would like to challenge some of the academics who've signed these things to also phone in to say, why did they sign? Let's go to Pam in Claremont. Good morning, Pam.
Hi, Pam. Caesar, I'm sorry, I'm slightly nervous.
Okay,
so give
that's
me
fine.
a few minutes.
It's only us here. You don't need to be nervous.
Thank you. I would like Professor Esack, Farid Esack, to comment on the legitimacy of Israel in the light of the 60-year occupation of the occupied territories, and to comment on the colonization of Palestine, as Israel has colonized Palestine and ignored the borders that it was prescribed with the Balfour Declaration.
I'm sure
and the water that it has usurped and occupied and removed from the Palestinians, and the ongoing destruction of Palestinian homes, property, land, etc.
Thank you very much, Pam. I'm sure the professor is furiously right. And there's Sebastian in Cape Town. Good morning.
Hello, good morning to you.
Good morning, Sebastian.
I'd like to make 2 points. The firstly is that Professor Esack is making an equation between the Israeli Defense Force, and that's put emphasis on that name, Defense Force, and an occupation. Basically, that's not the main purpose of the Israeli army, and basically Israel is facing strategic threats militarily from a number of countries. Now very much pushed by Iran, but you've got Syria on its borders with, last figures I heard, with 12 standing divisions versus Israel's 1 at any time. And, a lot of aspects of the Israeli Defense Forces are being overlooked by this very simplistic argument of Professor Esack. For one thing, it was the most effective relief team in the early stages of the relief efforts in Haiti. That wasn't reported on the South African news.
Okay. So you had 2 points, Sebastian, and we're fast running out of time.
That's my one point. Could I get into the other?
Yes, please.
The other point is this. In this petition, they're talking about the oppressed peoples of Palestine. What about the oppressed peoples of Gaza, who are oppressed by a despotic dictatorship sponsored by Iran? And how about the oppressed peoples, all the people of Israel, who have been under continued military threat for 60 years since the nation was founded? That's the purpose of the Israel Defense Forces, to defend against this.
Thank you very much,
and
Sebastian.
I have been at Ben-Gurion and Gaza, and I can actually talk from experience. Ben-Gurion's a developmental university doing a lot of very positive things in the world sphere.
I'm sure Professor Esack does not dispute that, Chief, because that's not really the issue that he's trying to address. But thank you very much, Sebastian. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something very briefly, please, because we've got 2 more callers before we go for a break? Sebastian is gone. Okay, let's go to Robbie in Johannesburg. Robbie, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
I just wanted to make a comment about that statement that was made regarding the petitioners, the academics who signed on to the petition. I've been following the story, and I've gotten names such as Brayton Breitenbach, Mehmoud Madani, I believe Achille Mbembe, Einke Kroch. The statement that was made that these are people who want to fast-track themselves in the intellectual arena through this form of petition, I find it a bit difficult to believe. And my sense is, I think Professor Esack addressed it, that there's a somewhat insulting and patronizing tone that these people would sign on to something that didn't actually support facts. And then another comment, I've been following the story, my understanding is also that the University of Johannesburg itself confirmed the allegations as it has been put that have been leveled against BGU as being complicit in the occupation through its support of the IDF, and I haven't heard that being controverted against either. So thank you very much for the debate.
Thank you very much, Robbie. Let's go take the last caller now. David, before we go for a break, David in Johannesburg, good morning.
Good morning. My question is to the professor. I presume that the institution has undergone quite a lot of academic rigor in performing a full audit of all the relationships that it has with institutions around the world and with institutions in other countries that may have controversial human rights records. Presumably this isn't just one political agenda that they're trying to pursue, and it's about their academic integrity generally. So So I'd be interested for him to comment on the audit and the results of that, and what they're doing with institutions in other countries that may have controversial human rights records.
Good. Thank you very much. I think that's quite clear. Let's take a break, and that'll give our panel the opportunity to ponder the questions and the issues raised, and we will give you a chance to do so immediately.
Gordon Brown doesn't want to see another generation condemned to poverty without education.
One of the great Greek philosophers asked the question, when will there be justice in Athens? And his reply was, there will be justice when those that do not suffer are as angry as those that do. I am angry about the waste of opportunity and potential in education in so many parts of our world today. But I am inspired by so many people who want to make possible in our generation the right of everyone to be able to go to school.
What moves you enough to make a difference? Touching Lives at sabc.co.za is a SABC News initiative.
The After 8 debate on SAFM.
Well, Professor, there seems to be an issue about whether or not you accept the legitimacy of Israel on the one hand, and on the other hand, you're saying, Brenda, you seem to be being asked as to what your actual real understanding is in terms of what the Palestinians are looking for. But let's start with you, Professor, please. This issue of legitimacy not being accepted, therefore, us as South Africans losing out on the technology. What is
a number of things. First of all, as for the question of the legitimacy of Israel, that's an ideological question. States all the time, throughout the ages, have contested these things about legitimacy or not legitimacy. I'm not interested in discussing the legitimacy of Israel or the legitimacy of Pakistan or the legitimacy of South Africa. What kind of South Africa am I talking about? Do you want me to talk about the legitimacy of an apartheid South Africa? No. We must fight it and create a new South Africa. Okay. Do you want me to talk about the legitimacy? I'm busy. You can ask me when I'm done.
Okay, let's not be patronizing. Yeah, okay. Do you recognize the right of Israel to exist or not? It's very simple, yes or no?
I recognize the right of any country to exist that is currently existing, and that country founded on non-racial and democratic principles.
Brenda, I'll give you a chance to ask the questions, because I think I would like you to respond to some of the issues which have been put up.
Israel is a state that exists in the community of nations. I have no particular reason to oppose the existence of any state that exists in the community of nations. Okay. But this whole idea that you must prove your humanity by justifying or supporting the legitimacy, I'm not going to fall for that kind of trick. Secondly, the question of, a huge amount of good things are being done. Water supplies, water purification, and so on. Black people can benefit from it. Palestinians can benefit from it, and so on. Fine. In the South African Defence Force, we also know the tremendous services that was rendered by the apartheid army to the Khoi people, to the San people, to lots of rural communities. None of those services, this charity, should be allowed to displace the simple truth of the systematic dispossession of Bedouins from their lands. This whole idea about we're doing medical services, we're doing charity and so on, and therefore we should be allowed. Right. This is like saying I'm giving my domestic worker old clothes. Give your domestic worker a decent wage.
We've got 30 seconds before we go to headlines, but one thing, have you done audits of all the other universities with whom you have a relationship? If yes, say so, or if no.
The question of Ben-Gurion came up at UJ, and in formulating the question of Ben-Gurion, Senate's instruction was clear to the committee that they must evolve a set of principles that will be applicable to any other such situation as they arise.
So there are no other audits as at this point.
Senate has established a clear principle that whatever principles we come up with in relation to Ben-Gurion must be able to be applied to any other university that violates the human rights of other people.
Let's ask Ms. Vabakshni Chetty to give us the headlines, then we'll come back to you, Brenda, after the headlines and traffic and morning talk. Good morning, Vabakshni.
Thank you, Caesar. Good morning. About 700,000 people have signed a petition for more funds to fight HIV/AIDS, which will be handed to UN Chief Ban-Ki-moon today ahead of a meeting of donors. The Born HIV-Free campaign says the petition calls for the international community to provide the necessary funds to eliminate the transmission of HIV from mothers to children by 2015. Opposition is growing in financial circles to ArcelorMittal South Africa's deal, in which it has sold a stake to a group of investors who include President Jacob Zuma's son. And the Dutch anti-Islamist MP is to go on trial in Amsterdam on charges of inciting racial hatred against Muslims. Geert Wilders faces up to a year in jail if found guilty on charges relating to a film he made in which he drew parallels between the Quran and Nazi ideology. Details at 9.
Thank you very much. Now, Rob, please take us to work. Is he not there yet? Okay, now we'll take a break because we're looking for Rob Byrne.
Jacob Smith is a shift supervisor and works in the deep tunnels following the silver seam of platinum, 1.6 kilometers underground. It's his job, and he does it well. But it's who he comes home to that matters most. Like Jacob, we put family first. We're running the world's largest free workplace HIV counseling, testing and AIDS treatment program for our employees and their dependents. It's how mining produces precious things, like a baby born without HIV. Find out more at getthefullstory.com. Anglo-American. Real mining, real people, real difference.
A new brand promise. At PricewaterhouseCoopers, now PwC, we believe value is created through meaningful relationships. A new visual identity is the next step in our journey. Our brand is our promise to our people, our clients, the community, and our markets on what they can expect of us. Our new brand promise is, my relationship with PwC helps create the value I'm looking for.
Electra Mining Africa 2010, South Africa's global expo, showcasing mining, general industry, construction, machine tools and power generation, is on at MTN Expo Centre, Nasrec from 4 to 8 October. Don't miss Electra Mining Africa, 4 to 8 October at MTN Expo Centre, Nasrec. Pre-register at www.electramining.co.za. See you there.
Traffic on SAFM.
Good morning, everyone. A collision leaving Krugersdorp heading out towards the N14. It's on the R28 Padercrol, just in the vicinity of the casino complex. A taxi is overturned. A lot of emergency services on that particular scene. So if you're heading north from the central Krugersdorp area along Padercrol, expect some delays. Traffic lights are out this morning at Barry Herzog, Tana, Victory and Rustenburg Road. There are some pointsmen manning that up and doing duty, so you should be okay getting through there. But if you're travelling after 10, once the pointsmen have left, it will be slow again. Also a collision on the N1 North just after William Nichols. So it is slow on that route anyway because of the roadworks at the Rivonia Road off-ramp, but just coming up through Four Ways is very slow. The N1 through Midrand still pretty sluggish between Samrand Road and the Allendale Road exit into roadworks, and the R21 still queued up from Olifantsfontein Road going down to the roadworks just south of the Bupsfontein exit. Northbound in Durban, there's an obstruction at Spaghetti Junction, so the northbound traffic on the N2 is very slow coming up from the M7 from the Queensborough side into that. And then Cape Town, there's some traffic light issues on the Yiptiyaga Drive exit from the N1 outbound side, and the N1 traffic going through towards Belleville, wanting to off-ramp there, is backing up quite badly as well from sort of Parow up through Plattercliff Road as you go towards that Yiptiyaga off-ramp. That's very slow. N1 inbound from Monte Vista through to the Kuba, get a change of slow. N2 Bunga Avenue through to the M5 is still under some pressure as well. And just a reminder that Main Road is to be closed today for northbound traffic at Clairvaux Road. That's where you'd turn off Main Road and go towards Boys Drive. For the next 2 years, starting from today, that section of Main Road between St James Station and Clairvaux Road becomes southbound only. So all the traffic will need to detour onto Boys Drive that's coming in from Simonstown, Fishhook and the Cork Bay area. Traffic lights not working correctly. The Racecourse Road at Doncaster Road, which will be slow coming over the M5 down into Kenilworth area. Rob Byrne, AM Live, Traffic Watch.
Thank you very much. We're back online and you are welcome, Ziggy. What do you have for us this morning?
Morning, Caesar. We're talking about the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, a group of citizens who have come together to act as custodians and champions of the South African Constitution. Then we'll talk about translators and interpreters after 10, focus on gender transformation in the accountancy profession. And on Siki's Corner, we canvass your views on the morality of paying a bribe. That's Morning Talk with me, Siki, between 9 and midday.
Make sure you are part of the massive business growth about to happen in Africa. Perfect your management and leadership skills at the UNISA Graduate School of Business Leadership by completing a master's or doctorate in business leadership or one of our management and leadership programs. For more information, call 011 652 0000 or visit sblunisa.ac.za. The UNISA Graduate School of Business Leadership. First in leadership education in Africa.
The After 8 debate on SAFM.
Well, I know that there's a lot of you out there who are really wanting to talk to us, and I can see that we've got quite a number of callers on the line. But when we left, actually, we had set a question to Brenda to say, Brenda, how does Ben-Gurion view itself vis-a-vis the conflict between Israel and Palestine?
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to move beyond the rhetoric a little bit, but we've had a few callers in, and I'm going to very, very briefly address the issue. Firstly, to start banding around this idea of charity in your domestic work is just, quite repulsive rhetoric, and I'm going to just dismiss it and reject it out of hand. The reality is, as Haitians will tell you, who were served by the Israeli army field hospital within 4 hours of the tragedy happening, there's nothing charitable about receiving emergency medical aid. Interestingly enough, this comment was made about how Ben-Gurion has displaced Bedouins. In fact, Ben-Gurion University has been the most powerful, empowering force within the Beersheba region for rehabilitating Bedouins, for empowering them, for getting them into formal education, for improving their access to health and the quality of health care that they've got. So, really, if there's one thing we've realized after all these years of conflict, is we can either have rhetoric or we can have reality. I prefer to deal in reality. This notion that I'm being patronizing when I dismiss some of these, or question rather, some of the motivations for the people who have signed the petition. Democracy is a strange beast, and it's not the first time that people have used this, and we know they haven't. Do we start trading human rights records and credibility? President Nelson Mandela, our revered president, and if anyone is an icon of human rights, felt that it was completely appropriate to accept an honorary doctorate from Ben-Gurion. And in fact, when he accepted that honorary doctorate from Ben-Gurion, he used the opportunity to both laud the work that Ben-Gurion does in the field, particularly of water, but in all the areas, and particularly in empowering Bedouins and minority communities. I want to get to this issue around
Yes, I was going to
water.
say, could you please,
But he also said that these are the kinds of relationships where Ben-Gurion can play a constructive role, and does play a constructive role, in promoting peace. Ben-Gurion has one of the best track records through our relationship with the Jordanians, where we run exactly the same water project with Jordan as we run with South Africa, or we'd like to run with South Africa. We've been doing that for 3 years. It has proved beneficial to both countries. We have just signed an agreement with Nablus, with the Palestinian Authority. And let me just make this point. UJ says he's imposed this condition of working with the Palestinians on BGU. BGU made this proposal formally to the Senate in May that we would like to expand our bipartite agreement into a tripartite agreement. So this is something we suggested 5 months ago. UJ has been delaying on this issue, and in fact has allowed it to become politicized.
Brenda, time is going to run away with us. So we need to get to the callers at the stage, and otherwise I will even lose my own job here.
Sorry.
Let's start with Michael in Cape Town. Good morning, Michael.
Morning, Caesar. Firstly, I'd love to congratulate you on actually arranging a balanced debate for a change on this subject involving Palestinian and Israelis. Normally, we would have a one-sided propagandist viewpoint like from Professor Esack on his own to spout his normal anti-Israel diatribe. So really, congratulations on having a balanced view.
Okay, Michael.
Brenda is fantastic. On the issue, I wonder who the loser is going to be. A third-world little university like South African Johannesburg University, or a university like Ben-Gurion. I think the loser is going to be the University of Johannesburg. And finally, I just want to say we're obviously expecting the normal anti-Israeli mafia, Yusuf, Mohammed, Bashir, everybody who blames a bad sunset on Israel. It's really great, Brenda. You're doing a great job of balancing the normal propaganda we hear on this program.
Thank you. Can I just say one thing?
Very
Let's not
quickly,
denigrate
please.
the work of UJ. South Africa has a real task in transforming our universities,
Thank you
and
very
we should
much.
be working with
Thank
them.
you, Brenda. We really need to move on. Eddie in Fixburg, quickly. Eddie, good morning. He's gone. Let's go to Faisal. Faisal in Mayfair, good morning. Okay. All right. Looks like... Sorry. Okay, Faisal, are you there now? Okay, let's go to Fixburg one more time. Eddie, good morning. Well, looks like we do not have anybody on the line, and yet we've got numbers shining all over the screen here. Well, let's come back. That only gives us more time here in the studio. Now, we need to look at this, and I want to come back to that question, the issue of the audits. Are there going to be more audits of other relationships that you have? And could you tell us, where does this relationship come from? How did it get about, and why are you so concerned suddenly after 15 years of post-apartheid South Africa?
Well, like all agreements signed by the University of Johannesburg in its previous shapes, and I don't think that it is fair to hold the University of Johannesburg hostage to its apartheid legacy, as if every single one at the University of Johannesburg, all of these Afrikaner academics, they now have to prove that they were not complicit in apartheid and so on. But having said that, the Ben-Gurion Agreement was initially signed during the apartheid era. It was recently re-signed, and in the context of a university that is transforming itself, it was inevitable that this agreement would get to the scrutiny of the more progressive forces on campus. Of course, those progressive forces could now be dumped as just political, but these people are people who've earned considerable stripes, moral character, weight, and so on in a real liberation struggle that many, many white people may poo-poo and dismiss and so on as just political. But we know, I and you, Caesar, would not have been here if it weren't for the victories achieved by that struggle. So don't just dismiss this whole transformation wave that the protestation against Ben-Gurion is actually a part of. As for the question of is this now going to be applicable to all, the first thing that we must understand is the logic behind this is warped. It assumes that you can't engage in recycling. You have a commitment to environmental justice. Why are you recycling if you're still wearing leather shoes? The awareness of leather shoes may come to me at a later stage. At this moment, I can recycle. At this moment, we do have a relationship with Ben-Gurion. I can do something about it. If you now want to throw Cuba at me and Iran with me and the United States Army and its crimes against humanity in Iraq and so on, I can come to there. I'm happy to sign petitions for these rights and that rights, but at the moment, I'm faced with a Ben-Gurion petition.
Okay. And why is that the overriding concern, one would ask?
What I would like to ask you, Brenda, to do is to actually, rather than asking him questions, to make a statement about what he has said, because otherwise it will lead us nowhere, and we've got callers back on the line again. So a brief response to him, please.
Let me have a brief response. Firstly, can I just remind Farid that white comrades were very much involved in the struggle. So to start doing, quite frankly, this absolute amateur racialization of the struggle is just repulsive, and I'm going to reject that too. Let me tell you something. All of us would not be here if it was not the contribution of everyone in the struggle. So don't denigrate the contribution of white comrades in the struggle.
I wouldn't for a moment
have
done
just
that.
have.
That's precisely why I defended.
If I could just carry
that's
on.
precisely why I defended the Afrikaners at UJ.
Well, that's
and said
very
that we should
impressive,
not
and
have
I'm
hold
sure they're
them
very.
hostage
I'm
to
sure
the
they're very
past.
appreciative. I'll tell you who we should not hold hostage. You should not hold hostage the Palestinian people to a narrow political program, and Hamas
let the
is
Palestinians
stranglehold.
speak for themselves.
Well, let them speak for themselves, and let's
And
not
those who act in
you and
solidarity
those your
with them.
cronies.
Right.
Yes,
I
who
I
act in
think we'll go to
solidarity,
callers.
but who have just assumed patronizing their position.
Let me go to callers, please, if I may. I think we've got Mohammed back from Lenasia. Good morning, Mohammed.
Hi, Caesar. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Caesar, firstly, your one caller said Israel is surrounded by hostile states. And the fact is, Israel got 300 nuclear weapons. And the second point is your guests, they always, they call you fascists, fundamentalists, or Jew haters, or anti-Semites. They never stick to the debate. They always attack you and label you. And then the foreign minister of Israel last week said all the Palestinians must be ejected from Israel. He's calling for ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
And then the same Israeli army is shooting ambulances and all that. So what's he going to say about it?
Okay, Mohammed, but we are trying to talk to the agreement, actually. Let's go to Eddie in Fixburg. Eddie, good morning.
Greetings, Caesar, to everybody. Caesar, thank you for a nice hot subject. Can I just say this unequivocally? If man does not stop war, war is going to stop man. Israel, United Nations, America, and Anglo-America are synonymous in one struggle, and that is world domination. And I really believe somebody must move out of the Middle East before we have a war. Either Israel must move or the Palestinians. Who's been the longest there? I'm afraid the Palestinians have been the longest. Israel is welcome to go back to America, United Nations is their organization. Brenda, we've got to do this. Brenda must have started.
I'm sorry.
All right, Eddie.
I am white.
Brenda, okay.
Brenda, wait, I want to answer you. Brenda, I am white, you know it. But you know that we're going to have a war there.
I don't know you, white, and I'm not interested in what your race is.
Brenda, okay. Eddie, we're going to move on if you do not mind. We go to Heidi in Cape Town. Heidi, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for holding this debate. I think it's an incredibly important issue. And I want to just say that I was a signatory on the petition. And something that was incredibly important for me is the question of not breaking dialogue, but shifting the terms of dialogue, because I don't agree with Eddie. Jews have lived in Israel, Palestine for centuries, actually, and but their role in the area geographically has not been limited, except in the last 60 years, to a form of ethnic nationalism that determines the form of the state and its exclusions. So I feel that the role of scholars, intellectuals, academics is to be critical, particularly around questions of normalizing structural violence. And what we know is that after 67, the conditions of the occupation have become increasingly more severe, that Israel, and I think its cause internationally, is becoming harder to defend because of those actions. And I think that the petition that has been initiated at UJ asks us, as intellectuals, as critical thinkers with a social role after apartheid, to think about what normalizing structural violence means.
Okay.
This is a question relevant to South Africa still, but incredibly important in the context of Palestine-Israel.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Let's go to Akash. Akash in Mayfair. Good morning.
Hi, sir. Thanks a lot for the debate. Just two really quick things. The one is to Brenda's question about who do you stand in solidarity with. I'm not too clued up on the issue, but as far as I understand, the Palestinians have actually asked for Israeli institutions to be boycotted. Maybe she could speak to the boycott call made by, I think it's by over 200 civil society organizations or so, that's based in Palestine. And then the second question to Brenda is that, Brenda, you say that you support the Israeli Defense Force and its charity work. Do you also support the Israeli Defense Force and its crimes against humanity and its war crimes as confirmed by our South African Justice Richard Goldstone? Because if you do, then allow us to also oppose the Israeli Defense Force.
Okay, thank you very much, Akash. Let's go to the last caller now. Jonathan, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to you and good morning to Brenda. Brenda, brilliant. Keep up your thing. We are tired of listening to these Muslims who always are knocking apartheid, but they benefited. They have never been suppressed in South Africa. If you look at all the wealth in this country today, all the mills, all the oil mills, all the shops and factories, it belongs to Muslims.
Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. Now, if I may come to the panel, it is very, very important as we come to the last 10 minutes of this show that let us please not lose sight of what we wanted to try to get to the nub of, and that is a university cutting off relationship with another university on the basis of moral high ground or the basis of wrong relationships, on the basis of principles that seems to show the other university to be complicit in things that are anti-human rights. That really is the nub. However, having said that, The issue then has arisen, and Brenda and yourself, Prof, if you could, what is the role of scholars? What should it be? And as you see it, and why should UJ not do what they're doing, and why should you do what you're doing with Ben-Gurion? That is the one thing. The other one which is raised is that the actions of, and this was a fairly pro-Israeli caller, I thought, actions made it hard for people to defend Israel at this time, and maybe speak to the fact that, and I saw you responding very strongly, that there are civil society organizations that have said, please boycott, join the boycott, and this is from within Palestine itself. So maybe you want to deal with that issue before you deal with some specific issues that may have been raised by the caller.
Okay. Firstly, let's just say that, one of the joys of democracy is that we all have a different opinion. I mean, some of the opinions, thank you for the support from my new growing legion of fans. I will tell you that I do not appreciate racist comments. So, but I'm sure the Jews are very happy to know that the Zionist conspiracy is over. We don't own everything, and now the Muslims do. So, let's just be careful of how we characterize and stereotype. The one thing I want to say is the following. Firstly, we should be focusing on the academic relationship here.
Yes.
And I think it's unfortunate that we keep getting dragged into the political relationship. I'm a graduate of Wits University. I'm an ex-Wits SRC vice president on the first non-racial SRC. I was on campus during the heyday of the struggle. There's one thing I know. Campuses are not immune, nor are they bubbles from the wider environment and the community and what goes on. But the reality is that over the generations we have learned one thing. It is absolutely vital that we keep that almost sacred bond where academics can communicate, where academics can share ideas, where academics can hold sacred the idea of free speech. Because if universities become closed institutions like we have seen in the past, then we are in real trouble. Universities are hotbeds of dissent. I mean, in Ben-Gurion we have from the left to the right, up, down, whatever. We have Jews calling other Jews whatever you like. The reality is democracy is very important, and I'd like to focus on these projects. One of the things you asked is whether in an apartheid relationship it's appropriate to continue.
Yes.
This relationship was not about supporting an apartheid institution. This relationship was about supporting a university where the expertise existed, which was at UJ. And through a very generous donation, and which has now been renewed, it is facilitating scholarly work that benefits the very real benefits on the ground. So
Okay,
I just the one last thing I want to say is that, nobody has a copyright on human rights, progressive notions or anything else. I don't have a problem supporting Israel. I'm here to represent the University of Ben-Gurion. I'm here to make sure that the interests of South Africans are met by positive water projects that can actually improve the quality of life.
Let's come to Professor. Professor, please talk to us about this thing about the role of scholars, the role of universities, and the transformation of society.
I'd be happy to do so. Two things very quickly. First is, Brenda, I'm delighted in your disavowal from this really ridiculous kind of, it's Muslims. Nobody has Muslimized this thing. There was no need to Jewify this whole thing. And at the same time, Brenda, I want to draw your attention to the fact that you're probably at variance with the president of the university whose institution you represent here today. Rivka Karimi has gone out of her way in the last few days to pick out and to single out Muslims as being behind this, fanatical Muslims, fundamentalist Muslims, and so on. So thanks for going a little bit beyond the very parochial and bigoted view of the president of Ben-Gurion University. As for the question that this is a scientific thing, that this is a academic agreement thing, the other organization that you represent here today is the South African Jewish Board of Deputy, who has brought you onto this program. Brenda, in 2009, it was this Jewish Board of Deputy who announced that this particular research project combines with itself political, economic and science perspectives. And now that it is convenient for you, you guys want to walk away from the political and the science perspective. Finally, I want to say this, that the whole idea of reaching out, cooperating, let's have peace and so on, these are valuable ideas for us as South Africans, absolutely valuable ideas. South Africans who were engaged in the liberation struggle were never against reconciliation and peace. But there was a time in our lives, in our nation's life, when we simply had to privilege the struggle for justice, the fight for justice, economic boycotts, resisting apartheid, fighting, when we had to privilege that over just the idea of blacks and whites sitting together. The Palestinians from all of their organizations, all of their universities are at that stage where they're calling upon the world to divest from the state of Israel and its institutions.
All right. Now, you still have not really given me what I would imagine is your understanding of the role of scholars. We'll come to that because we've got
to speak the truth to power.
We've got 4 more minutes to go, but let's give you, Brenda, an opportunity to respond to the same question.
I'm going to challenge that. Firstly, the Palestinian Authority is not in favor of a boycott. The Palestinian Authority, under the framework of the peace agreement, is very much in favour of maintaining links, particularly education links, both because of the opportunities.
And since when did the homelands represent the South African government?
What so now you're calling into question the legitimacy of the democratically elected Palestinian government? Sorry, if I can just finish, that's absolutely ridiculous. Yes, I agree with you. Perhaps you should have Hamas, who should carry on. What was it? Throttling at the neck.
Hamas is another story.
Sorry, Farid, 1 second. Hamas is throttling the neck of the Palestinian people. And this is what I find particularly interesting. Hamas, Freudian slip. Sorry, Farid. Let me ask you this. You know, you've pulled in your political credentials, your credibility, your struggle credentials, all the rest of it. Why should the rights of South Africans, poor, oppressed South Africans, and let's not talk black or white, because, you know, it is across the colour line. South Africans need access to water, whether they're black, white, coloured or Indian. Why should the rights of South Africans who do not have access to clean, healthy drinking water be trumped by the rights of Palestinians? Surely the rights of South Africans, and quite frankly, let me tell you, you don't hold the brief for speaking for Palestinians, because Ben-Gurion has a very, very comprehensive relationship with Palestinians, and we have a very, very proud record of engagement with Palestinians. So the fact is, as South African, I'd ask you, whose rights trump whose?
It is quite simple. Ben-Gurion University is founded on Palestinian land.
Absolutely
ridiculous. For Ben-Gurion
ridiculous.
to come along and say, we're going to offer charity somewhere else in another country while we are doing this to all the people around us. The people around Ben-Gurion.
Science is not charity, it's an academic engagement, and you're denigrating the work.
We all know about how science was used inside South Africa as a part of ideologization.
Talk about the science that your peer groups as professors are now doing to improve the life of South Africans.
All of these free clinics cannot make up for the systematic dispossession of the Bedouins from their lands.
They have not been dispossessed from their lands.
Folks, we've got less than 2 minutes now, and I really would like you to bring yourselves as much as you possibly can. We started out really asking the questions. Should universities ask uncomfortable questions that might lead to their being stifled, not being supported, and people and so on and so forth? And really, in conclusion, could you speak to that in particular, Brenda? Should a university do so? And if it does, on what basis? And I'd like you to conclude the same thing, and we've got less than 2 minutes.
Right.
Brenda.
I think it's very important that universities should be voices of dissent. I think that UJ has been remiss in allowing the voices of dissent, and certainly not the voice of students, has been heard in this debate. I think students are the ones at the cutting edge of the university who are going to be jeopardized because they are not going to have access. I mean, we have PhD students in these joint projects whose work has been put on hold for the last 6 months. Okay, the reality that universities should contribute to discussion, but if you either start from a point where you acknowledge the right of your adversary, as it were, to exist, or you start from a point where you acknowledge that they don't have a right to exist, and then we have a different debate.
Right. Okay,
The,
Chief, your
the
closing
Student
remarks.
Representative Council of the University
Which
of
is not
Johannesburg
representative of students.
Was completely in support of this agreement.
Has no mandate from the students.
That's that you
Please,
can argue.
Brenda, let him conclude.
So the SRC has been in complete agreement with this mandate. As I've said, academics have the single most important task is to understand that they function within larger systems and to critique those systems. And that our task is to speak the truth of power regardless of what kind of incentives are held out
so why
to us.
does UJ
Thank you
vote
very
on
much.
this
We
issue?
do have to close, otherwise you'll be cut very rudely at the end. One land Palestine, one father Abraham. Will there be peace in the Middle East? Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.